Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today, leading up into the weekend, I've curated 5 sweet lists for standard best of 3 that you can try out this weekend. 4 of these lists have gotten 5-0 in terms of MTGO leagues, so they went undefeated, they trophied in there. And the last deck is from one of the community members. Really cool list that I want to try out. They've been trying it out a bunch on MTGO as well. So kind of off meta is the focus of all these. There's a lot of standard best of 3 lists, your mono reds, your various ramp piles, stuff of that nature. Really what I wanted to kind of focus on is things that haven't really been putting up too many high stats or kind of off the wall kind of deck ideas. I am waiting to get historic and explorer data as well as alchemy to be able to do the best of videos for those. So just trying to get something out in the meantime and then kind of highlight some of the evolutions, the new things. I'm sure, as you can see, like I got my mono red here, I got my ramp deck, in historic I got my ring decks and my wizard decks, but we want to try out some new things in the format and kind of try out from there. So I'll link all these deck lists if you want to take a look. If you're just looking for like your run-of-the-mill like mono white decks or stuff like that, mono red, the ramp piles for standard, check out the video I posted earlier in the week on the top decks. So the first deck is a green Red Cauldron deck. So Agatha's Cauldron is a sweet new combo card seen play in like Modern, apparently in Legacy as well. Like Walking Ballista goes off with it. Yawgmoth's been playing it. You could like use it to like activate Grist's ability, which is kind of cool because it's a planeswalker creature, weird kind of thing. So Agatha's Soul Cauldron lets you spend mana as though it was any color for activated abilities. Creatures you control with a +1/+1 counter on it have all the activated abilities of all creatures exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron. And then you can exile target card from a graveyard. So it's general graveyard hate, but when you could kind of put creatures under it, and then you get to put counters on a creature that you control if you exile the creature that way. So there's a lot of creatures with activated abilities that we care about. So in this deck here, you have things like Voldaren Thrillseeker. So any of your creatures now get the ability to have Fling stapled on. So you're going to be making big creatures. You could kind of go to town like that. Kami of Whispered Hopes has the ability to, in some configurations, give you infinite mana. So this version's not really about the infinite mana line, but it does have the ability to help you ramp if needed. It also can kind of pay for itself if you want to throw the value there. This version's more just about making a big creature, protecting it for the turn, and then throwing it at your opponent in a way. You have Questing Druid, which gives you both card advantage and then lets you put counters on it just through regular cards being played. So a lot of ways to kind of fling at your opponent. Teachings Occurring, give you a body, mills you, and then puts counters. Thundering Raiju cares about modified, so you have the abilities there. So notably, this isn't a activated ability, it's a triggered ability, so you don't get to copy that. Ren makes you tokens that have hexproof, so this is something that you can throw all the abilities on, which is kind of cool. You have Ginger Brute for unblockable. You have Haywire Might for artifact enchantment hate, so you can sack the creature as well. Tyvar Stand for protection. Seed of Hope in there to fill your graveyard, kind of mixed into that. So pretty sweet deck. Nahiri's Warcrafting, Witchstalker's Frenzy, as just more kind of removal spells in the deck. The sideboard is just kind of a mix of removal. Strangles, Haywire Might, Ginger Brutes, just when you need those activated abilities. Brotherhood's End, Light Up the Night can be used with the big mana that you could produce from Kami. Burn out your opponent. Lithomantic Barrage for like white decks or blue decks. Haywire Mites just against artifacts enchantments. Then just more copies of like Nahiri's Warcrafting, as well as the Witchstalkers, and then you have Twisted Fealty as a way to steal your opponent's creatures. So, really interesting one. This is one that I definitely want to see in action. It's got a really weird assembly of cards in there, kind of seeing how it goes. So, mono white midrange has largely fallen off recently, in part due to so much Farewell being played. This version here tries to offset that. Mono white also kind of got beat up with all the ramp decks. So this version does have some elements of the mono white mid-range deck that we saw before. Your Ossification, Spirited Companion, Iganjo's Wedding Announcements, Wandering Emperor, but it's splashing blue in this version, so it's like a blue-white mid-range shell. So you get your Fairy Masterminds for card draw, gives you Make Disappear, as well as more counters in the sideboard. You're playing 2 copies of Invasion of New Phyrexia, so this can be a big mana sink. You make a lot of tokens, and then you get to Fairy if you flip it. So it draws you cards unless you discard a creature. Your knights get plus additional power, and then ward, and then tap any number of untapped creatures you control. When you do, shuffle that many target non-land permanents into its owner's library, so kind of a one-sided board effect. The tokens have vigilance as well. You're also going to be making tokens with Virtue of Loyalty, which also are knights. So you kind of have a like blue-white tokensy, tempo-y, mid-rangey shell. Teferi also makes you tokens. So a lot of vigilant tokens, which is really nice. Lets you go offense, defense, draws you cards. The Virtue itself can be cast and put counters, so you can kind of go really big in terms of the deck itself. Myrexes make you tokens as well. Your sideboard, just like anti-control with the Disdainful Strokes, Toskia's Welcome versus heavy removal, Memory Delusion to grind your games for card advantage, Invasion for hand hate, Lauren for artifact enchantment hate, Sunfall, and the Eternal Wander. You could probably even go like with the deck itself. Since there's such a prevalence of mono red that's been going around, you can go with like cheap removal like Elspeth's Smite, dealing 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. You can also go Knockout Blow if you want. So there's some considerations on how you want to build for the early game. Because you'll usually, against mono red, if you can survive to the mid game, you're going to win just because your stuff's really powerful that way there. Moving on. So Abzang Control, this was the same player. They 5-0'd 2 days in a row with this Abzang Control deck. So it's a creatureless control deck, and it's featuring Up the Beanstalk. So this is a new enchantment. This card's seeing play in Modern, thanks in part to all the evoke creatures. So it's like free, like the evoke creatures usually are card negative because you're discarding a card, but you get to take advantage of this and draw a card from that. So you're kind of getting your payoff. This is a cheap cycler early game that basically draws you cards when you play any of your sweepers. So you have Sunfalls in here, you have Virtue of Persistence, that can also be your win con, and then you have Expel the Interlopers as another kind of board wipe, which plays pretty nice because you can make a bunch of tokens, name 2 or greater, and then blow up all the bigger things while keeping your small things around. March of Wretched Sorrows as March of Otherworldly Lights, both as removal options. That scale, you can overpay for the mana as well with this, and then draw cards. So kind of a cool thing there. Just lots of removal in the deck. Commune with Spirits both hits you your land drops, as well as Confine like Up the Beanstalk, as well as Virtue of Persistence. And then you have Celestis to help you ramp. You're winning the game most often with either like a Sunfall token, White Sun Zenith, the reanimation effect of Virtue, Myrex tokens, or the like Restless Cottage. So lots of ways to kind of play around with that. Field of Ruins, Besieges to blow up your opponent's creature lands. So the previous day they had Graveyard Trespassers. They switched to Concealing Curtains. Gives you a blocker earlier with 4 toughness against more aggressive decks. It can be kind of a Thoughtseize style effect. There is Parasitic Grasps here for just aggressive decks. Path to Peril, Sweeper, just more removal. Hand Hates in here, and then Cruelty Gigs for the big mana deck. Steal a card from them, search your library for a card, and then you also get to reanimate one of their threats, which is nice. Breach the Multiverse is a card you could consider as well, just as another option to play in these types of shells. Give you another effect like that to just kind of like hate on the big mana decks themselves. It makes you a little weaker to Itali because they can steal your stuff and then hit your breach. But this one's really cool, a different take on control. We're very like conditioned to think control is blue-white only, or like, you know, blue-based control, but this is kind of taking a different approach to the format. Then we have Bunny Enchantments. So Enchantments has been a deck more so in best of one. It's had the odd placings, but again, another deck that's very susceptible to Farewell and then the exile removal. So this version here is including Regal Bunnicorn, and it's playing with like the Hallowed Haunting Mains, the Virtue of Loyalties. So it's looking to kind of go wide. make you tokens, get you a whole bunch of value, and then give your enchantments flying. You can throw like a dead Catilda onto Regal Bunnicore and make the ultimate and aggressive Vampire Spirit, Warlock, Rabbit, Unicorn. Clearly the way to do it. A lot of card advantage. You have Commune of Spirits. The Rite of Harmony, you can do it on your upkeep when you have Sagas flipping, so draw cards off that. And then Hallowed Haunting plays really well into like heavy removal that's not Farewell, to provide you some card advantage in that respect. One card you may, so the thing is you have to play Ossification, so you have to have a decent number of lands, but you may want to look, even with this mana base, you can probably, so you have the Razor Verge, you might want like, it's probably a little tough because you have to play the basics for Ossification. I'm thinking if you want like the slower land, but so there's a version like this that did well. There was also a version, I can link it, it's a little bit more aggressive. It has 4 Virtue of Loyalties as the Weaver of Harmony to double up the counters on this. It's playing 3 Blind Mice and Calyx, the 3-mana Calyx, and then Calyx makes a copy of 3 Blinds Mice, that makes a copy of the 3 Blinds Mice copy, and you kind of just go off like that. So I can link that one as well if you're interested. Circle of Confinements. So just like a bunch of removal, you have like some Wedding Announcements for the grindy decks, Vanquish the Hordes as Sweeper, Destroy Evil for bigger things, Stonebrain, like naming kind of, I would name Farewell because it like absolutely destroys this deck, but you might want to name like Invasion of Alara, Atraxa, kind of any of the threats that you think are relevant. Knockout Blows for the aggressive mono red decks, and then like I said, a couple of announcements for like the black-based mid-range piles. And then lastly, this list is from Yeoman5 on Twitter. Does a like 50 decks per new set for Cool Stuff, I think, or TCG Player. Check them out on Twitter. They always post really cool lists. So this was, they were working on trying to improve the Alara list and then came up with this kind of iteration. So it is a fight rigging deck that can use Shakedown Heavy as well as Archfiend of Dross. So kind of that package to do your payoff. But now your payoff is like Reach the Multiverse. It's a Tali that gets you a bunch of free casts. It's Nissa. It's Virtue that's also early removal. So you have cards that can be useful early. Bramble Familiar helps you ramp. Virtue Persistence. And then they're also payoffs. So you're not going to really run into the instance where your fight rigging now hits like a Mana Dork. Little removal early would go for the Throats as well. And then you have like 8 2-mana Accelerants. Your sideboard, you have early like removal and cut down. Terra Sunders is catch-all removal. The End as your ban list, name something. So 2 copies of that. 4 copies of Duress for heavy counterspell control style decks. Spectre of Mortality. So 5 mana 3/3 enters the battlefield. You may exile 1 or more creature cards from your graveyard. When you do, each other creature gets -XX till end of turn, where X is the number of cards exiled this way. So kind of a sweeper on a creature. I don't know how reliably you're going to be getting cards into your graveyard. I guess with Breach, it's a way that kind of plays with that, but I'd be interested to see how this card plays out in practice. And then you have another copy of Nissa. Very good against like the heavy sweeper style decks, stuff of that nature. So that's it for today. So 5 decks to kind of give a shot. Let me know if you do try out any of these, how they work out, what your thoughts are. And like I said, I'll try to be out as early as possible with Historic and Explore. I will probably be doing more gameplay for the next couple days. I'll be live a couple times, so we'll try out a bunch of these decks, see how they work out, and try to explore some of the older formats as well. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one. Stay safe out there.